Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 5, A Shadow and Bone. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love how the whole troop situation worked out in a sense that, how, obviously, Jasper and Inej are getting in their own way, but obviously it's well, yeah, how is he going to get in? And then we find out, he gets in by pretending to be a guard. I was like, yeah, I had to rewind it to be like, oh, that's him right there. And I was like, oh, because I saw him at the end of the scene, but I didn't realize that was him still there. You know, the guy that was acting as a distraction. It's kind of like he looks to Kaz and they kind of nod towards each other. So that was an interesting means about getting in there. But obviously, all this is kind of in celebration of Alina, because obviously it's like a showcase in front of a lot of people. Jenya, we obviously see a little showcasing more of her powers as a tailor, obviously the makeup she puts on Alina. But it was really interesting to this conversation, and this seems like this is kind of picking up where I had picked up before, where Kiergan was kind of like, oh yeah, she needs her training undisturbed, and the king was like, fine. It seems like we get a little bit more of that, because Jenya is kind of like, yeah, as long as the queen has the king's gaze, it doesn't turn to anyone else. And in that moment, Alina almost looks like she's about to say something, but she doesn't. So it's it almost seems like, oh, the king's like a horn dog that harasses the women under his charge. So it was almost Genya being like, yeah, as long as he's looking at his wife, he's not looking at me or anyone else. That's why I kind of got that weird feeling when like I said, when Kiergan said that a couple episodes back, so that made me think yeah, so it seems like there might be some truth to that. So, but nevertheless, yeah, David the fabricator coming in, and he's kind of a little awkward and stuff like that. I thought it was he might have been up to something shady, because Kiergan asked him to craft this glove for Alina because it's supposed to help her with her powers. But then Alina takes off the glove and she's able to split the light on her own, and it's oh, I don't need it anymore. He's like, okay, good. And then he leaves, and Jenya's looking at him, and then Alina puts it together. It's oh, look at you. And she's like, what are you talking about? It's you never compliment anyone to their face. Ingenious and everything. She's like, shut up. Which I love that Jenya's kind of become her bestie. I thought that's pretty dope. Obviously, she's also talking about Mal a little bit, but for her more so than anything, and even Jenya kind of picks up on it. It's she kind of is fascinated with the with Kiergan, because it's because she's when you return from the party, because you're supposed to wear black, I think it'd be nice for you to go back to the blue. But she's no, I think I'm gonna wear the black for a while. And then Jenya says a line of, I'm like who you're becoming, but be wary of be wary of powerful men. It's what she wanted her to be careful about, because she realized even realizing every powerful man kind of uses people around here, whether it be the king. So I think she was talking from personal experience, but even saying the general is a very powerful man, but they use people, in particular women. So just be careful in that, because she could tell Alina was falling for Kiergan, especially as she's forgetting more and more about Mal. It's oh, there's no letters from Mal. It's no, don't worry about it. You don't have to look for it anymore. And it's that's actually heartbreaking too. Once again, it's in comparison to last episode where we saw what I brought up in the last review, she's kind of drifting away from Mal. Mal's trying to drift further towards her. So those opposite elements, it's kind of actually sad to see that kind of continue in this episode. But obviously, it's about the celebration and the party. Obviously, a lot of people have gathered for this, including people who are some people are whispering about oh yeah, all that stuff that's going over in the West. Oh yeah, the general over there. It's yeah, he's kind of running things. It's oh, so Ravka West versus East is kind of a thing, and it's yeah. But it's if if the Sun Summoner is a real thing, we'll have to rethink our support of him. So that's kind of an interesting implication. So who knows how many other people there were in that same boat of whether or not they were supporters of the West sovereign, being sovereign, or what. And also is interesting to know there's people still oh, we'll see how the tides work, because there's plenty of people who are oh, we're trying to pick the winning side in this, and if they've got the Sun Summoner, oh, that tips the scales a lot. So we'll see how this all kind of plays out. But ultimately, there's also the element of, Alina and Jenya going out to the festivities, and obviously one of the performances being put on is oh, here's Alina the Sun Summoner, which even Alina's oh, that's a bit awkward. Should I tell him it's really me? And it's no. And then a Fedor shows up and be like, okay, he says my other half, so I'm like, oh, it's him, like him and Ivan, are they actually like not just partners, are they like partners? I was like, because the way he feeds him later on, I was like, oh, that's super cute. I was like, that seems like that's a couple thing. That doesn't seem like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Which even him, like, obviously it's interesting, the parallels between them, kind of the opposites attract, because Ivan's kind of a hard ass, but I even love that being a thing later on. It's like, oh, because it's like she goes to Kiergan's room and he's like, Ivan, and he's like, oh, you're not Ivan. She's like, oh, would you prefer I was? It's like, nah, you gotta give Ivan a chance once you get to know him. He's actually pretty funny. And she's like, you must think Volcra are hilarious too. Ironic statement in a certain extent. And we'll get to that soon enough. But yeah, Alina and him are hitting it off. It's like, but you see them make out and everything. You're like, oh, this is a love triangle situation. It makes you feel a little bad because once again, you're like, oh, Mal, oh, that sucks. Especially because Mal made his way back to like check like to his people, and they like patched him up, and it's like, all right, we're going to send this letter to the general about finding a stag. And Mal was like, let me do it. And him and Tofin or whatever the other dude that was with them, it's like, all right, let's go do it together then. So, and once again, doing everything he can to get to Alina, but she's kind of unaware. It kind of makes it whole circumstance even sadder. Then there's also Jasper checking out the Stablehand, which even Inej is like, you're not even paying attention to me. You're too busy checking him out. I was like, what? No. I was like, I mean, to be fair, he is handsome and everything, but it's like, yeah, it's just like, you should be picking out a faster card. He's like, no, it's a trick question. There's no such thing as like a faster card. You're a model and all that. It doesn't matter. What matters is the horse. The horse is what determines the speed and stuff like that. So it's like, she's like, you shouldn't be so damn proud of yourself under the circumstances. But, which later on, he's getting all flirty with home dude. What's his name? Demas. And it's like, oh, they shack up and everything. I love the whole thing of it saying, oh, you were the troop. He's like, no. I'm a terrible actor. I was like, look at you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But it's like, I do like a light bit of role play. I was like, okay. And then they proceed to do their business. And it's like, both of them are like, oh, shit, like, that was awesome. It's like, yeah, I know, right? That was, oh, I guess I got to go. It's like, yeah, but that was, I know, I agree. So it's like, that was neat. Because I was also like, because earlier in the season, I was like, is there like an Inej and Jasper thing? But it seems like that's not the case. I mean, to be fair, we don't know. Jasper might float both ways for all we know. Might not just be dudes. He might be into ladies too. So, you know. So that could still be an element, but it just might be like, oh no, he's just into dudes. Fine either way, but I was curious. Like I said, I could have just, it's probably like no, they're such good friends. But to me, if that's the case, it's like, oh, leaves room for like the Kaz and Inej thing, because it seemed like that might potentially be a route they go down. It might just be like no, you're reading too much into this, Michael. It's just a trio of friends, like, you know, because obviously that becomes an interesting conversation, like, not relationship-wise, but like, Inej is the only one that kind of wants to have belief and faith that the Sun Summoner is real. For Jasper, it's like, it doesn't matter. As long as we get paid, I don't care if she's real or not. Kaz doesn't believe in any of this, but she does. Because it does seem like, well, she is kind of a woman of faith and believes, like, because for her, it's like, if we believe, because having something to believe in like that is a very strong thing. We'll get to that later on, too, because that comes up in this episode. But it's like, how strong faith can be. And it's like, I mean, hell, that's how cult leaders are able to, because people have their belief and their faith in someone. Like, you know, that's how the people, like, I mean, that's how religions get started, and just like how much power that can amass in its own right. I mean, that's even a thing, like, people are treating Alina like a saint, even going as far as referring to her as like, oh, Sancta Alina. So it's like, yeah, worshiping her like that, which even she's like, wait, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. But regardless, when they get the opportunity to, Alina and, you know, Kiergan showcase everything. She shows off her powers, splitting the light and creating a spectacle. And once again, Alina's, I'm curious like, we never got to see what Kaz's reaction to it was, but it was just like, we definitely got to see Inej's, and I think that's going to go a long way going forward in the story. I loved also what we set up about, like, okay, like, everyone's plan. The moment they referenced the, like, Link's plan or whatever, like, Jasper and Alina and Inej were kind of like, wait. Like, Inej was like, wait, we're going with that plan? It's like, yep. And then, like, you had what's-his-face, the Conductor being like, Arkin being like, oh, we're going to do this. And he's like, what is that? And it's like, they kind of explain everything to him. And so initially, like, it's like, oh, like, you need this certain thing to get it. It was like and you need like 2,000 or 1,000 pounds of like pressure or something. What he was kind of saying, it's like, well, yeah, just don't keep this in your pocket for too long or something. So at first I was like, okay, and part of me was wondering whether there was going to be more to that or not, especially later on. It was like, oh no, we'll handle this and we'll handle that. You go to this particular room and kind of unlock the door, like, because Kaz was checking it out earlier. But then there was this moment later on when Kaz was getting his uniform, when Arkin is picking up his uniform, he's like, okay, I'll meet you up later. And then Kaz kind of gave him this look. I'm like, you guys are... Because at first I was like, he's going to be the distraction. You're going to lead him to the wrong spot because you know she's not going to be in the dress-up room, which kind of ended up being the case, but we'll get to that in a second. But it's like, I was like, he's going to be the distraction. You're sacrificing him because it's like, well, he's not part of the squad. But then later on, it's like, he shows up in the room, and I was like, at first I was like, oh, that's not actually Alina under there, that's going to be like Marie or something. And lo and behold, it turned out to be Marie, but she was, Genya had used her powers to make her look like Alina. And the sad thing is, he ends up slitting her throat because we go back to what Kaz, like, that was kind of, like I said, a suspicious thing of like, right, you were like pretty tight-knit with the leader, like Kaz picked up on that, and so obviously Kaz planned out for this, and even Inej being like, are you, like, how do you know, like, what if we kind of screwed him over and he's part of it? It's like, no, like, two of the most powerful men, and it's just like, he happens to be meeting with it. It's like, no, there's something definitely shady going on there. Sadly, it turns out he ends up killing Marie, and, you know, even her telling Genya, like, please turn my face back. I don't want to die as someone else. I want to die as myself. And it's so sad, too, because, like, her and Alina were hitting it off earlier because she was telling that story about a former Lord. She's like, oh, yeah, I, like, freaked out, and, like, I burned him. A Squaller had to push him into the lake to kind of set him off, you know, kind of get rid of the fire and stuff like that. So they told that story on purpose at the beginning just to make you go, oh, that sucks. Like I said, that was, like, one of... you know, that's one of, you know, Alina's pals, you know, her and Nadia. So it was just kind of sad to kind of see things go down, especially for Nadia not to know either, like, no one to know, you know, about that. So that makes the circumstances even sadder in that situation. But nevertheless, but to find out, like, yeah, like I said, he was using this as an opportunity of, like, right, as a conductor, I can get in there and I can kill Alina because the last thing they want is the East to have the Sun summoner on their side, because that can change the course of this war, and it can kind of end this side of borderlining civil war that's happening. It could end in... Plus, also, like, if she gets rid of the Fold, that they kind of lose a lot of their leverage, I think, to a certain extent. Not only her power on their side, but also, like, shifting a lot of, like, belief in the East, because it's like, oh my god, they have the Sun Summoner, so it's like they were trying to get rid of her as soon as possible, because get rid of this, like, symbol of hope for their side of things. Once again, faith's a powerful thing, and that's, circling back to it, the spiritual advisor brings that up to her, because it's like saying, like, oh, you have a much larger role to play, and it's like, what the hell is that about? I don't think whatever his thing is, I don't think his same thing as Kieran. Kieran's thing is his own thing. Maybe there's something more to that, maybe he's kind of leaning into that, but he was telling her, like, no, you got, like, a greater purpose ahead of you. Like, the fact is, like, you know, the power that can build empires, crush empires. And it's like, what is that? It's like faith. Faith is such a powerful thing that, you know, once again, you can kind of convince so many people to follow you, to believe in you, and so on and so forth, right? So it is a situation where, like, showcasing, like, how powerful faith can be in the grand scheme of things. So that was just kind of an interesting conversation to ultimately end up having. So obviously, Kaz and Inej are making their move. Like, all right, let's go grab Alina. Crap. Here's the general. All right, plan B. Oh, that Inferno's showing up. All right, actually, plan F. I love we went like, let's skip C, D, E, and E. Like, it's like, okay, makes you wonder what those plans were going to be. It's like, also showed you who Kaz is, that he's really good at, like, coming up with contingency plan upon contingency plan, so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting. Like, also the question is, like, well, how many plans did he actually come up with in total? Was, like, F, like, the last resort type of thing? I don't know. But he was leading the Inferno away, and the Inferno's like, oh, you're not supposed to be here, limping man. But then ultimately, he ends up taking the Inferno down, because it's like, I'm a spider. I might only need one good leg, but I think you need two hands. But maybe that's the case with some Inferni, but with him, it's like he only needs one. I guess, like, the more highly trained Grisha don't need both hands to use their powers. They just need one. I should also circle back to it, also showing you like how like good Kaz is picking up details, because I noticed Marie was in the room and I was like, oh, is he going to think that she's the one? But then later on, Jasper overheard Alina and it's like, oh, that's interesting. And they found out about her circumstances. But then it was like, then I was like, oh, so I guess there's no like mishap on accidentally kidnapping Marie, but it does come full circle when Arkin tries to kill her because he thinks it's Alina because she looks like Alina. But the interesting development is like Kaz, when he looked into the room, he had saw Marie, but he had also seen two dresses, and Marie is about the same size as Alina, so he kind of put two and two together. So once again, just showing you like his forethought this to kind of piece so much stuff together. So that was an interesting element. I'm also skipping over the whole Mal thing. That was interesting. Him rolling up, it's like, yeah, we got the Stag. You know where the Stag is. It's like, and that guard being like, oh, you BSing? It's like, dude, you literally have a myth inside of your castle. You're scoffing at another myth, you know? So he goes in and talks with Kieran, and obviously, and like, I love later on because Kieran's like, oh, I don't really know if you're really, it's like, you know, someone, you could just be lying to get close to Alina because a lot of people have been, but it's like, he knows exactly, because the moment he met Mal, he was like, Mal, the Mal I've heard so much about. Interesting. Once again, he has to be the one that's responsible for getting rid of all the letters between them, making sure, because the whole point is to cut her off from everyone else so that she only relies on him. He kind of needs that. But the whole situation is like, it's like, oh, where's the Stag? And it's like, well, I'll tell you where it is if you show me where Alina is. And then obviously, you know, Mal's like, oh, blue irises are her favorite, not the whites. And he later on shows up to Alina. Hey, oh man, look at these blue irises. Oh, I know they're. It's like, oh, you're such a shady man. That's like I said, I already been feeling shady towards him, and I brought it up in a previous review. I felt so bad because I'm like, I think some of my bit, like, it's probably just the characterization of like they're making it clear he's kind of got ulterior motives, but it was also the fact is that like it's Ben Barnes playing him as once again Jigsaw from Punisher, so already like I had that little sting of like, oh, you there was a turn for your character in that, so I'm waiting for the turn for this one. So it came as no surprise. The reveals were interesting to me because I wasn't quite expecting that, so I think, which we'll get to in a second, but yeah, he has sends like Mal away, and then like there's a whole thing with Bagra being like, oh yeah, like he can't know where the Stag is because we can't let him have that much power. And it's like, oh, so you know about all this, like, you know, like it's going to be some power tripping type of shit. But it's like, it's actually much more because like Alina and him are making out hardcore, and it's like, oh, it's about to lead to other stuff. I almost halfway expected Mal to come by the window and see it and be heartbroken. Nah, instead, he gets called away because of the whole Maria and Genya thing. But then, like, Bagra shows up. It's like, yeah, I'm getting you out of here. And breaks it all down. It's like, actually, the person you've been hanging around, he's going by different names, but that is the Black Heretic. He's the one that started the fold. It's like, wait, what? Yeah. Oh, how you know? Oh, yeah, let me use this darkness power. It's like, I'm his mom. And it's like, it's like reveal on reveal, and you're like, wait, what? And I figured as much that like his whole thing was like, oh, most likely he'd get Alina and then he'd have a lot more power under his control. I figured that was going to be the case. But it turns out like, it seems like the Bonesmith's other like creatures, it seems like he's potentially been hunting the others, and maybe the Stag is the only one he doesn't have. So combined with that and Alina, like he'll be unstoppable. So Alina kind of realizing like all this was a lie, and it's like, yeah, he manipulated. You won't be like the first naive girl he's manipulated, but yeah, he's kind of eternal. He's faked a lot of deaths and stuff like that. We even learned that the Volcra that are inside the fold are also innocent men, women, and children that were transformed because of his power, like him being power hungry and stuff like that, which is like makes you wonder, like, as the Sun Summoner, could she reverse that? Is there any reversing that? Also, it also begs the question, could he actually get rid of the fold if he wanted to, and he's just been lying the entire time? And it's like, no, it probably is just too much for him, but he's probably thinking like, I don't know whether his plan is to take the fold down and absorb it into himself so he can be like an all-powerful god type of shit. We'll have to wait and see on that front, but which is also interesting because unbeknownst to her, Bagra tried to kill Alina's friend, who was actually like, if she had probably like known that ahead of time, granted she shot like, oh, you're a tracker who found the Stag. Well, we can't let him know the truth, so you have to kind of go. So Bagra's person, that Grisha ends up getting killed by Mal, so that was close. I was almost hoping they'd get to talk. I thought she was going to bring him to Bagra to talk, but it's like, nah, I need you to dispose of him. I got to go rescue Alina from all of this. So, and it's like, wow. But we still never got an answer for, like, how is he still alive? Why are you still alive? You know? And it's like, why have you... I mean, to be fair, it's like he served so many kings and stuff like that. I think it's so interesting that, like, she's been playing this role, like... There's no hints of that earlier on. It's like, oh, you know, but I guess it's like that's why you're so separated from everyone, because he probably keeps you there. It's like, if you step out of line, lady, I'll kill you, and a whole bunch of people. I'm always ready to restart at any point in time. Maybe that's what's going on, because I'm like, why haven't you... I don't think she can match him in power either, even though they share the same power, because we see that, like, powers are hereditary. Which also begs a question about, like, Alina's parents. Like, were they both sun summoners, or at least one of them was? Maybe that's why they're not around. Like, once again, she said, oh, I assume they're dead. She doesn't know for a fact, but she thinks they're dead. Maybe there'll be some reveals on that front. But, so... Initially, she sends Alina down a different path to, like, kind of hide away. But then, you know, Alina decides, like, no, I'm not going to do that. So she goes down another path. I don't know, because she was planning on trying to stop him, but it's like, oh, you're not strong enough to fight him. I was hoping that I'd be able to train you and get you stronger, because I guess she wasn't expecting him to make moves so quickly. But it's like, yeah, he's waited so long for this. He needed a sun summoner. He's been waiting a long time for this opportunity, so he's jumping at him. Like I said, I'm curious. Maybe the next episode will kind of get into, like, why Bagra has been just, like, sitting on this. It's not like you can really explain this to anyone, because no one else is going to really believe that. It's like, oh, you're crazy or whatever, you know? So it's like, oh, there's crazy Bagra, so... But I guess it's like, she's like, all right, I will sit here, be the crazy old lady, sit to myself, and slowly be preparing things. Because I'm wondering, does this have something to do with the spiritual advisor, or is his thing, like, separate from Bagra's? I think there might be some commonality there. Maybe not. Maybe they're two separate things and going on. Because he's got his own deal. Because the way he was also, like, talking about her destiny, like, she has something greater, like... I don't know what that's about. Like I said, he might have his own plans and stuff like that, separate from both Kirgin and Bagra, but we'll wait and see. It's going to be interesting, too, to see how this ultimately ends up tying over to, like, all the stuff in the East with the, like, kind of, like I said, this whole, like, Ravka kind of borderlining civil war thing that's brewing. Like, I'm wondering what kind of effect that will have on it. But obviously, like, he's still trying to suggest, like, I am saving lives. I am trying to do good. Like, this isn't about me. This is about Alina. But, like, his mom's not buying that. And it's like, you know, you should kind of be careful, because the fact of the matter is I basically can kind of end you. I can make something terrible happen to you. So you might want to keep that in line. Like, you know, you are of no use to anyone, so if I feel the need to. But it's also like he keeps her around and doesn't do anything because it's his mom. Like, I guess he's enough of a mama's boy that it's like, oh, I can't get rid of you. Even after all these years, you're my mom. I love you too much to actually get rid of you. I will threaten you. Maybe the point will come in the show later on. I'm saying all this now, and the irony being like, oh, later on he ends up killing his mom. Wouldn't be the first psychopath to kind of go down that path, but once again, he's the villain kind of pretending like he's the hero, because like this all happened because you're obsessed with power. You've always been greedy and obsessed with power the entire time. You've just been waiting for the opportunity. You've just been playing the role of the hero. I mean, it's interesting too, because he had that whole thing about like, oh, I've missed so many of my soldiers died and stuff like that. But to be fair, Bagro was being like, oh yeah, did he show you like the wounded child or whatever? Like, you know, it was all an act and everything. So there's that. At the same time, circling back to it, because I brought it up earlier, like that encounter with the Inferni, he was about to kill Kaz, but luckily Inej stepped in, and obviously she kills him. Like, she could have gone another way, but she wanted to make sure he was okay, and it's like, for her, it's like, that's a big no-no. Once again, it's because of her faith and stuff like that, that, like, it means a lot to her, so she didn't want to, like, do, like, obviously this is a big sin for her, but Kaz is like, you saved my life, so come on. And it's like, well, we got to get, you know, Alina. And while that's all happening, I love it. Alina sneaks in the back of a carriage and everything and gets inside of a box. And I love Jasper almost looking like, wait, what? Did that just happen? No. He's like, no freaking way. That didn't just happen. And he's like, holy shit. And then Inej and Kaz show up, and it's like, okay, so, yeah, we couldn't find her. He's like, come on, ask me. Go ahead, ask me. It's like, well, where is the target? And he just smiles, and they take off. It's like, yeah, she's actually back there. It's like, that's ironic and funny that I was like, wow, she literally got in the carriage for you. You didn't even have to do anything. But I also was thinking the entire time, like, you know, when it was revealed about him, I was like, when it was revealed about Kiergan, I was like, oh man, this kidnapping could not have had it happen at a better time. But there's also the situation of Mal overheard. We don't know how much of Kiergan and Bagra's conversation he overheard. Probably overheard enough that later on he's probably going to sneak and talk to Bagra. It's like, okay, I'm a friend of Alina. I'm trying to protect her. Like, you know, I'm the one that knows the Stag. Yeah, you try to kill me, but yeah, like, we kind of want the same thing. You want to protect her. I want to protect her. But it also might be a thing where Mal's like, I don't know who I can trust under these circumstances. We'll see. But it's also a thing of like, she's like, right, you need to find a tracker. Mal knows Alina better than anyone, and he's a tracker. So Kiergan might find out about that and kind of force his hand. I don't see Mal cooperating with him. To be fair, heart renderers and stuff like that could easily probably sway his mind. That might be kind of where we see that going, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But I'm really, really interested to see ultimately where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.